What is the authority from which he speaks? He has no formal religious training. As you said before, he didn't do especially well in his university studies in Saudi Arabia. In the introduction to the book, you talk about his mastery of various written forms in Arabic that make his message more appealing and are providing a classical context for what he's saying. But this is not a religious scholar. How is it that he comes to make these kinds of blanket statements? How is it that he is enabled to interpret religious history and tradition the way he does, and yet there is a following that emerges for him over the course of time?
I think of all the questions you've asked, this is the most important one for understanding bin Laden. Everything we've said up to now is something which you could go through a biography and say, well, we got to the point where he's now, if you will, been a spoiled rich child who's been a haphazard student, who's found a way of life as a revolutionary fighter, who's come back and been rejected by his government, who's now tried to find some life in exile, and finally goes back to a place where he can be recognized as a warrior. What then allows him to step up to the plate and say, I'm also, by the way, the spokesperson for all Muslims, and my group represents the interests of the entire Muslim world? That's the crucial question. And I would argue that he has antecedents you can look for in Sayyid Qutb and in Maududi and Abdul Azam, people who are not trained per se in religious sciences, who are not authorized to be alim, or a part of a class called the ulama, but have, as it were, journalism. I mean, Qutb was a journalist. Maududi was a journalist. Azam had training in journalism. They understand the modern media. And I think the modern media is the key also to understanding the authority that bin Laden projects. When people ask me, give me one reason why I succeeded, I say, I won't give you one reason, I'll give you one name: Al Jazeera. Had he not been successful in having his message broadcast on what becomes the first satellite internet service in the Arab world, that's Al Jazeera in 1996. Before that, it was government controlled. There was satellite service, but it was all controlled by Egypt, by other Gulf states, by Morocco, Libya, Iraq, Syria, you name it. All of them had state-controlled satellite television stations. Qatar, after the internal revolution there that produced new rulers, also produced a kind of broader outlook on media, saying we're going to represent all points of view. Bin Laden got in the front door, and bin Laden was able to broadcast that in the same show as sometimes Vice President Cheney or Secretary Rumsfeld. You would also have an excerpt from bin Laden. And so bin Laden gets a new platform after 1996 of 55 million viewers in the Arab world at a time when it's not clear where the Arab/Muslim world is going. Now, that doesn't totally explain the response to him, but he peaks at a moment when people are starting to ask questions about what will happen, what is going to be the role of Arab-Muslim values and Arab-Muslim leaders in the future world order. The first President Bush had defined this notion of the New World Order, and it took not just Americans or Europeans, but also others thought, well, there is a New World Order after the battle between the Soviet Union and the United States is quote-unquote done and gone, and the United States has won. What will be the shape of the New World Order? And so one of the things that bin Laden did was to say, we have to have a representation, and we are now at risk, and I'm going to defend our interest in the New World Order.